I never pictured marriage feeling like this. I always assumed that after a long day, after the disagreements and the laughter, the exhaustion would draw us closer. But sometimes fatigue doesn't just settle in your muscles. It slips into your heart, into the place where love is meant to live. My name is James. I'm 38 and I've been married to Claire for 12 years. When we first crossed paths, she was lively, glowing, someone who could brighten a room with a simple smile. I was more reserved, quiet, but dependable. We balanced one another, or at least that's what I believed. Those first few years felt like something out of a love song. We cooked side by side, took unplanned road trips, and sent each other goofy texts during work. There was laughter, affection, and a warmth that felt endless. I remember drifting off on the couch while she hummed softly next to me. We had a rhythm, a natural exchange, a shared effort to keep our spark alive. But around year 7, I began to see the fractures. Claire started pulling away, not just physically, but emotionally. She wasn't cruel or openly upset. She just retreated. Little acts that once mattered to her now went unnoticed. A kiss on the cheek earned only a shrug. A hug lasted barely a moment. Our conversations became functional, empty, words spoken out of obligation, as if we were roommates instead of partners. I tried blaming it on life. Work pressure, bills, the non-stop needs of our son. I told myself she was overwhelmed, stressed, or simply needed breathing room. But space wasn't the answer. It was something deeper. It felt as though a wall had been built between us, slowly, silently, until all that remained was distance. I tried reaching for her in gentle ways, slipping notes into her bag, leaving small surprises, planning a weekend away. None of it made a dent. The more I tried, the further she drifted. Then came the sentence I'll never forget. "I'm tired. Don't touch me." The first time she said it, I went still. Such a simple line, yet it hit me like a storm. I remember standing there with my arms out, trying to close the space between us, and watching her pull back. Not in anger or resentment, but in pure indifference. That moment changed something inside me. For weeks, I replayed it over and over, dissecting every detail, wondering where I had failed, questioning how a marriage I poured myself into could unravel like this. I held on for a long time. I kept believing that patience and empathy could somehow rebuild what we'd lost. I did everything a husband should do, paid the bills, helped with our son's homework, cooked dinners, listened when she talked about her day. But I couldn't simmer warmth into someone's heart. I couldn't create affection where it had quietly vanished. Every touch, every attempt at closeness was brushed aside. And with each rejection, a little piece of the man I believed myself to be fell away. I'll never forget one night. The night things truly began to shift. I had a rare surge of optimism and thought maybe an honest conversation would soften the distance. We sat at the dinner table, our son asleep upstairs, the house silent except for the refrigerator's low hum. I reached for her hand, hoping for some hint of connection, some flicker of the woman I fell in love with. She looked at me with empty eyes and said again, "Don't, just don't." In that instant, clarity washed over me. This wasn't about stress or small irritations. She didn't want me. Not now, not yesterday, not for a long time. And strangely, it didn't spark anger. It made me aware of how much I'd been craving acknowledgement, love, and shared respect. I had given and given, hoping my loyalty would hold us together. But loyalty without return isn't love. It's endurance. The days that followed were quiet, heavier than before. I caught myself watching her from across the room, noting what wasn't there. The absent gestures, the empty space where intimacy used to live. And slowly, I accepted a truth I had tried not to face. A marriage without closeness, without emotional presence, isn't a marriage at all. It was cohabitation. Two people under one roof, but each living a separate existence, and in that shared space, I felt myself slipping away. That was when something in me began to shift. I stopped pursuing. I stopped offering smiles or hugs where they weren't wanted. Instead, I centered myself on my own routines, my own identity. For the first time in years, I gave myself the quiet pleasure of making choices for me, of reclaiming the man I had put on a shelf for a wife who no longer desired me. And in taking myself back, I felt an odd, unexpected calm. It wasn't loud or dramatic. It wasn't spiteful or victorious. It was simply clear. Those small adjustments in how I carried myself didn't go unnoticed. Claire saw them. Naturally, I no longer showed up on command, no longer reshaped my entire life to match the shifting tides of her mood. I became consistent in my independence, a stark contrast to the man she had grown accustomed to overlooking. And as she reacted, sometimes annoyed, sometimes quietly surprised, I understood something crucial. Her rejection no longer controlled me. I wasn't pleading for affection anymore. I was insisting on respect. And if she couldn't give that, it was no longer mine to shoulder. It wasn't revenge, not in any traditional sense. I wasn't scheming. I wasn't playing games. I simply altered the dynamic. When she reached for me and I stepped away, the silence said what words never had. For years, I had treated love as endless sacrifice, a constant contortion of myself to fit her moods, her needs, her exhaustion. But that night, I understood something essential. Love must go both ways. Respect is non-negotiable. Without them, everything else is hollow. The first time I said firmly, "I'm tired. Don't touch me," it felt unfamiliar. My voice didn't shake. It didn't rise. It was steady, deliberate, almost strange coming from me. But it wasn't harsh. It was truthful. For the first time, I echoed her own words back to her, not in anger, but as a simple reflection of reality. The walls between us, walls that had been there for years, suddenly had a mirror. She had been pushing me away, and now I wasn't letting myself be pushed anymore. The change wasn't instant. It never is. At first she seemed puzzled, maybe even irritated. I saw how she watched me from across the room, trying to interpret the signals she'd ignored for so long. But I didn't move. I kept living with intention. I gave our son my full presence. I returned to my own interests. I reconnected with friends I had drifted from. The man I had nearly lost under the weight of her withdrawal began to reemerge. And with every step I took back toward myself, I felt lighter, freer, as though years of silent tension were falling away. Gradually, the atmosphere in the house shifted. Not dramatically, not like in the movies, but subtly. The tension, the constant bracing for rejection, began to loosen its grip. Claire still had moments of distance, but I no longer absorbed them. I wasn't standing idle in my own life anymore, waiting for affection that might never arrive. I was active, present, self-respecting, and that change more than anything altered how she responded to me. There was a moment, weeks later, that stayed with me. We sat in the living room after dinner, the house finally calm. I looked at her and said simply, "I need space tonight." No accusation, no resentment, just plain truth. And she nodded, not irritated, not shocked, just acknowledging it. And in that small exchange, I realized something significant. When you honor your own boundaries, people have no choice but to see you differently. They may not transform, but they will recognize that you are no longer invisible in your own home. The journey wasn't seamless. There were setbacks, flashes of frustration, moments where I missed the warmth we used to share, but those moments were softened by the understanding that you can't manufacture love where it no longer lives. The only thing I could shape was how I treated myself, how I upheld my own value. And though that choice was hard at first, it became freeing. I stopped measuring my happiness by her responses. I stopped shrinking to fit a role that no longer existed. Looking back, I can see everything I had endured. The rejection, the indifference, the slow fading of connection. It had all settled on me like a weight I didn't notice until I finally stepped out from under it. I once believed endurance was a virtue, but I've learned wisdom is knowing when to let go, when to reclaim your energy, when to stop letting someone else's apathy define your sense of worth. That's the lesson I hold now. I won't pretend things are perfect between us. Legally, we're still married, but the dynamic has permanently changed. I no longer offer myself with the same open-hearted vulnerability. My touch, my words, my presence, they are no longer given freely without reciprocity. And in that intentional restraint, I've found a quiet kind of peace. Not revenge, not punishment, but clarity, self-respect, the certainty that my emotional well-being is not up for negotiation. Sometimes late at night, I still think about the early days, the laughter, the closeness, the conversations that stretched until dawn. Those memories don't hurt. They're bittersweet reminders of what once was and what can't be forced back into existence. And maybe that's the deepest truth of all. Love can't be demanded, coaxed, or manufactured. It only thrives when nurtured by both people. And when it fades, honesty is all that remains. Honesty with yourself, honesty with the other person, and above all, the courage to reclaim your own life. So now when I say I'm tired, don't touch me. It isn't out of anger or resentment. It's an affirmation of my dignity, a line drawn in quiet understanding, a recognition of my own needs, and a refusal to let myself vanish beneath someone else's indifference. It's not a declaration of bitterness. It's a declaration of strength. And for the first time in years, I feel completely, profoundly alive.